Hey, everybody, this is Trags, that is Skinny, and this is the Jungle War Skinny Bengals post-game pod for September 29th. Here in Carolina, the Bengals finally get into the win column. They get that goose egg out of the left-hand column, as Ted Karras said after the game on Monday night was the objective, and they do so. 34-24 over Andy Dalton and the Carolina Panthers. It wasn't always pretty, Skinny, here on Sunday afternoon, but I'm going to read a quote from Joe Burrow that I think kind of sums it up. And that quote is, and I want to find it, I want to get it accurate. I trusted Zach to go make a play. I thought he had enough space. Maybe not my best decision, but it worked out. In so many ways, Skinny, that quote sums up the Bengals day on Sunday here in Carolina at Bank of America Stadium. They made just enough plays to get out of Dodge with a win.
Yeah, and some of those were second effort plays like Zach Moss's. I mean, when he caught that ball, Mike, I as soon as he caught it, he's not getting in. They've got him. He's dead to rights, and the half's going to end with the Bengals on the 1 yard line, not scoring points and tied 14-14. Instead, he makes enough of a slight move and then just a great second effort to lunge for the goal line. That 14-14 becomes 21-14, becomes 28-14 after the Bengals' first drive of the second half. It was a huge play. Trey Hendrickson getting around the backside of Andy Dalton early in the game and just getting a piece of either the ball or the arm as he threw it, and Von Bell intercepting. Some runs down the stretch where they turned it over to Chase Brown and Zach Moss and the offensive line and said, actually brought in an extra offensive lineman, Cody Ford, said, you know what, go win us games in 4-yard chunks. And they did. I mean, that was really impressive to me. And listen, we can argue the merits of this. Carolina is not very good, but this team needed a win, and I thought it was impressive enough. To your point, though, yeah, it wasn't pretty at times on either side of the ball. Joe Burrow throws an interception when he and Jamar are on the same page. The defense obviously had its moments where it got burned early in the game, but I think this was it's going to sound stupid. It was a step in the right direction for a team, I think, that's still good enough to reach the playoffs if it plays to its potential and get some of these guys on defense back healthy.
And if you want perspective, and Zach Taylor made reference to this earlier in the week, they're at the exact same point they were after 4 games last year, 1-3.
When he said that, I knew that in my mind. Obviously, I knew that, but it didn't hit me the same way. Like it's like, yeah, you're right, and that was an ugly Week 4 loss. And to this point, they've really only had one ugly loss, in my opinion, because they played with Washington. They scored points against Washington. They had a chance to get that one. It was ugly for the defense. Kansas City, both ways. I mean, they made enough plays and didn't make enough plays. So I do think this is it's still a good football team that's battling some injuries. We'll get to some of the issues on the defensive side of it. But I'll be honest with you, Mike, this offense, it's maybe not as explosive as Jamar Chase's rookie year when you kind of had Joe Mixon in his prime and C.J. Uzomah was having a good year as an extra option, and Tyler Boyd was still maybe back into his prime, but still in it. T was entering his prime, and obviously Jamar was having a ridiculous rookie season, and Joe was coming back off the injury, playing the way you hoped. That offense was probably more explosive. I think I like this offense better because I think it can do more things and more things well.
I agree with that. And let's talk about early on, the Bengals needed a play from their defense, 4th and goal on the very first drive of the game, because you had a sinking feeling watching Andy Dalton rip apart the defense, hit that long ball over Cam Taylor-Britt to Deontay Johnson, I believe it was, on 3rd and 4. And you're thinking, oh, Lord, here we go again. And it was rookie Chris Jenkins Jr. with the biggest play of his rookie season so far, coming up with a stop on Chuba Hubbard at the goal line, making sure he doesn't get in. And from that point on, I felt like, okay, the Bengals sideline, by the way, exploded in joy, as they should. They exploded in joy, and you're like, okay, they've got a good vibe going. And they needed, I wouldn't say as probably more than points, but they needed it as much as scoring. They needed a good vibe on that bench, and that's what Chris Jenkins gave.
I mean, Mike, I tweeted it out that the Bengals had, before that stop, they'd gone 7 full drives dating back to the last drive in the Kansas City game, not counting the kneel down by Jaden Daniels at the end of the half end of the game. They'd gone 7 straight drives, giving up points. That would have been the 8th straight drive they've given up points, 6 touchdowns, 2 field goals, and they come up with the stop instead. And I realized in real time how good of a play Chris Jenkins made. I didn't realize until I watched the replay how great of a play Chris Jenkins made. He kind of gets himself wedged through the gap. He pushes the blocker kind of back into the runner. Because initially when I watched the replay, I'm like, Are we sure he made the tackle? And then you see that he did. He pushed the blocker and then was able to get off the block and make the tackle. And for a guy, I can recall at the Tampa Bay preseason opener, he got pushed out of a hold down by the goal line. Like, oh gosh, this kid's not going to be able to anchor down there. And he sure didn't do it on that play. And here he is anchoring in a key moment in the regular season. And he showed up in other ways, almost intercepted a screen. He felt like a kind of a dude today. And that they needed that because that defensive front obviously dealing with a bunch of injuries.
No question about that, Skinny. And I just thought that the middle of that defensive line, they weren't spectacular today, but that one play kind of, I think, gave them a sense that we don't have to be great, just be solid. And I don't think overall they were embarrassed. I thought the secondary took a big step back today, but I thought the defensive line held their own for the most part.
Which we saw with our own eyes. I don't care whatever PFF score gives it, or if a coach gave us the grade for that. Our own eyes told us how bad that game against Washington was from the defensive front. And yeah, I mean, you saw Sam Hubbard show up a little bit more today. Obviously, Chris Jenkins showed up. Trey Hendricks, until he got hurt, showed up. And Trey showed up last week too, but for the most part, he was the only one that showed up. But yeah, I think that's what you need. And then you look, you go, okay, get Sheldon back or BJ back or both back, get Miles Murphy back. And then suddenly you have enough reinforcements to make this thing work the way you hope to.
Right. And, we'll bring up the game book right here. If I can draw it up and bring up the stats. I'll have to get back to that in just a moment. But through the first half, Logan Wilson was a beast in terms of time. I've got it right here now. Logan Wilson finished the game with 5 tackles, 5 assists, 10 combined tackles. Jermaine Pratt, surprise, number 2, with 6 solos and 3 assisted tackles, combined 9 tackles on the day. Those 2 linebackers, look, we talked a lot about them through the first 2 games, both losses, of course. They really showed up big today, I thought.
Yeah, I think Logan's had a good year overall. Jermaine's had moments, right? Moments of good, moments of bad. The moments of good are really good where he pops the ball loose, punches the ball loose, and recovers a fumble. Moments of bad are he looks, out of place in space at times. Almost made a spectacular play today with Carolina pinned back towards their own goal line. He literally read the play from Jump Street, just didn't hang on to the football. It would have been a touchdown, or at least the Bengals having the ball deep in their territory. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I know it goes hand in hand, Mike, with what the front 4 does, helps the linebackers and vice versa. But if the front 4 is going to be injury riddled a little bit and they're not going to make plays, at least maybe they can contain some guys. You got to go make plays as linebackers, and I think they did that today enough times. Let's
get to the biggest highlight play of the day. We'll get to Zach Moss in just a second, but the 63-yard touchdown, Skinny, as it was happening, and I was sitting next to Ben Baby and Kelsey Conway in the press box, and I turned to both of them and I said, I just had a flashback to Baltimore 2021. It really gave me the same kind of vibes when Jamar bounced off 2 tacklers, got around a third. Once he hit the sideline, house money. And he had a convoy. It was impressive to watch T. Higgins and Chase Brown out in front of him. But as soon as Jamar Chase got to that sideline, he followed those 2 guys and he was gone. I really do think, we talk about the play at the goal line stopped giving them energy. That play certainly gave him energy as well.
And listen, I know he's frustrated with the coverage structures he's seeing, and it was visible in that Kansas City game, right, where he got mad when he got tackled and thought it was a penalty. But I think that was all frustration from all the things involved. And then last week, his partner in crime comes back, T. Higgins. Didn't do a whole lot. 3 catches, 39 yards, pretty pedestrian, but took some coverage away and gave Jamar some one-on-one shots. And what does Jamar do? He catches a 41-yard touchdown pass and a 31-yard touchdown pass. And then today, he turns a good gainer, a 15-yard-ish gainer, into that touchdown by just sheer athleticism. I mean, to your point, he breaks 2 tackles. That's enough right there to go, okay, you got another 5 yards. That was really good. And then makes the third guy miss. And when he gets to the sideline, you're like, okay, that's it. Night. And I think that's what makes this offense right now so good is if teams are going to roll stuff to Jamar, you've got answers. Jamar's just got to be able to handle those situations, well. There's going to be games where you're not going to get your looks, and the tight ends are going to catch 13 balls, and the running backs are going to run for 150, and your partner on the other side is going to catch 6 balls and a half for 60 yards like he did today. And then when you do that, the other defense goes, we can't let this Higgins guy run loose. Now let's just figure out a different. And I think that's what the beauty of where this offense is heading if it stays healthy. And Jamar still is extraordinarily capable of making huge, big plays. And that was a big one right there to answer that quickly.
I was in the locker room, talked to Jamar, and he said the one thing that impressed him the most about his own play on that touchdown was he held on to the ball after taking the initial shot. And I thought that was a great point by him because a lot of receivers do not hold on to that ball.
You're right.
Then you think about the fact that he not only holds onto the ball, he makes a spin move, he takes another kind of glancing blow, and he has the wherewithal to recollect it. I mean, he's an exceptional gifted athlete. Obviously, everybody knows that. But he's able to do all of that, pretty much show all of his skills and his assets on one play. It was really a remarkable play that, to me, sums up why Jamar Chase is a top 5 receiver in the NFL.
That was a great play. No question. Great play.
All right, let's move on to, and we said we were going to talk about this, and I already read the quote from Joe Burrow. It was interesting after the game, Skinny, that Joe Burrow acknowledged the fact that maybe with 6 seconds to go on the 1 yard line and no timeouts left, maybe you don't pass to your running back in space, in bounds. And if he doesn't get into the end zone, you don't wind up with 7. You don't wind up with 3. You have a goose egg. That could have been a huge turning point and momentum builder for Carolina. Instead, it gives the Bengals such a boost going into the locker room.
You know, I honestly thought, Mike, today, and I was really interested in the coin toss. Usually I'm not. I tweet it out just because it's the thing to do at the coin toss, right? And whatnot. Yes. I really don't pay much attention to it and just tweet out the result. But I honestly thought today, if the Bengals had won the toss, I thought they would take the football to try to get a lead. Because Zach talked to us this week, as you remember, and said, yeah, we need to play with the lead. We lean into our running game a little bit more. We're not able to do that because we're not able to play with a lead. They had a brief lead against Washington early, but he's talking about a sizable enough lead like they kind of did today. 3-score game in the second half. You can lean on your run game more. So I really thought they were going to take the ball, but they are big on trying to double up, as you mentioned, score before the half. The other team has minimal seconds to do anything. You usually don't score on what essentially is the last play of the half like they did, but you give the other team minimal seconds, and then you get the ball to start the second half, and suddenly maybe a 14-14 game does go to 28-14 like it does today. They like to do that, but I really thought, I'm serious, I thought they would take the football today, and obviously the decision was right not to take the football today.
Yeah, and, I just thought, and talking to Zach Moss after the game in the locker room, he said he was super shocked. Those were his words, super shocked that Burrow threw him the ball there. And then I asked Zach, well, that kind of reflects Joe Burrow's trust in you to make a play in space. And he's like, he thought about it for a moment. And he's like, I guess you're right. He does trust me. And I know why he trusts me, because he knows that I'm going to do everything I can to beat my man in space. And that man happened to be former Bengals safety Nick Scott,
who's not the best tackler in the world, as we know. And so maybe that's the right guy to go against. But I will say this. I mean, Zach had a little bit of drop issues the first couple of games. You remember that crazy wonky drive at the end of New England where, Joe throws the one where he supposedly had Jamar Chase open on and didn't pull the trigger on it and threw a check down instead to Zach Moss. It wasn't a perfect check down throw, but it was catchable and would have gotten you positive yardage, put you in at least a decent down and distance. I think the next game against Kansas City, he had at least one drop. And for Joe to trust him tells you a lot about Joe putting those kind of memories out of mind and then making, I guess, in his mind, the right play, right? That's what he's all about, is scan the field, make the right play. And to your point of what he said, I'm sure as soon as he threw it, he was like, crap, that is the right play when there's 46 seconds left to go in the half. It's not the right play if this is going to be the last play of the half. And Zach Moss bailed him out. And it was a great, great play.
All right. We've talked about Zach Moss. I thought I was so, what is the word? Cute, ingenious, inventive. I'm trying to come up with the right word and I can't come up with it right now.
Well, give me the scenario.
But Chase Brown, Bengals chase down a victory using Jamar Chase and Chase Brown. Well, now
we go.
You like that, Skinny? It's a long way to get to this.
Yeah, I'm waiting. But I'm trying to drag you along here, Mikey. I like it though.
It's a rough. This is like one of those Bengals drives in the first game of the year where
dink and dunk and punt.
Chase Brown, 15 carries, 80 yards. Skinny, that's a 5.3 yards per carry tote. That is like elite. That is, better than the Bengals' wildest dreams. And that's not insignificant carries. That's 15 carries, 80 yards, and his first 2 career touchdown runs. What did you think of Chase Brown on Sunday?
Yeah, the glimpses we've seen of him, you see that explosiveness, right? They just haven't been able to work him in. It's kind of the games have gone wonky. Zach Moss, the times I've watched him stay in as a pass protector, I think he's really, really good. So you kind of want to have him on the field. I think the Kansas City game, they worked a lot of screen game on the Friday that we were at walkthrough, and it felt like they were going to try to lean into that. And I remember they ran 2 in that game that I can recall, one that Joe clocked in the dirt, and another one, I think Chase caught it and was tackled right away, or even Matt even dropped it because the guy was on him right away. So they kind of blew those up. But I think you see that explosiveness that's there, that we've seen at times. Sadly, he had about 2, maybe 3 runs, Mike, where he was an ankle tackle, a shoestring tackle away from turning into a 60-yard run. He is very capable of that. He knows it. I was nice to see them trust him in some power situations at the end of the game. They're kind of running, I call it the old LaDainian Tomlinson play. It's that kind of counter run, and you got Cody Ford out there blocking and Eric All out there blocking, Cody Ford coming in as an extra tight end, and you're trusting Chase Brown to get you not only yards, but tough yards. And then Zach Moss does give you tough yards. I thought if you drew up almost a perfect combination of a game for these 2 cats, today was just about it. It really was. I mean, Chase didn't have a big play in the pass receiving game, but he had a couple catches. But Zach Moss did, and then Zach Moss got you some tough yards on the ground. This is the perfect scenario for what you want these 2 guys to provide you.
So each running back had 15 carries, Chase Brown the 80 yards. Zach Moss had 51 yards. So that's 30 carries, 131 yards. Joe Burrow had the other run on the day for 10 yards. The Bengals did exactly what they wanted to do on the ground. And that takes so much. Look, we've hammered this into the ground since training camp, I think. If you can run the ball like that and take the pressure off Joe Burrow, it makes him that much more effective.
Yeah, and I think 120 of those yards, they only had 11 on 6 carries in the first half, just kind of the way the first half went. So 120 of those yards, Mike, on, do my math, 24 carries came in the second half when, honestly, there was a couple drives there where Carolina, they knew Bengals are going to run the football. The Bengals lined up and said, yes, we are, because we're bringing an extra big guy in there, and here we come. And they kept churning out yards, churning out first downs, eating clock, getting to a field goal that basically clinched it. I mean, that's what good teams do. Find a way to finish that game. And they didn't finish it with luck. I mean, it looked like it might have been at 31-24, and Andy's got the ball one more time. I know he was on his 8 or 9 yard line, so he's in a negative spot, but he's got it in his hands with a chance to tie it. Your defense gets a 3 and out in 19 seconds. And I don't think they played great complimentary football today, but this was one moment. Your defense gets a 3 and out in 19 seconds, and then you basically run the clock down to kick a field goal.
All right. One more positive, and then we'll get to the Bengals secondary. And that positive was Ryan Rico.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that last punt, I thought, was maybe one of the 3 most important plays in the game. Certainly, you would have to think the goal line stop. You would have to think Zach Moss, then the 63-yard touchdown catch by Jamar Chase. So maybe let's call it the 4th most important play in the game was his 61-yard punt inside the 10-yard line. Actually started Carolina 1st and 10 at their 8-yard line. I thought special teams today all around outstanding.
Yeah, and the reaction from Darren Simmons after that punt was pretty much said it all. Like, I asked you to punt it in a certain spot, asked you to punt it with distance in a certain spot, and you did both of those things in a clutch moment. Listen, I have to give this kid a ton of credit because we saw him in camp, Mike, and there were days where you'd watch him and go, "Whoa, look at that cat's leg," and there were days like, "Ugh, that wasn't even just a bad one. That was a total dud." He's been great. I mean, Listen, I know he didn't punt in the Washington game because nobody punted in the Washington game, but he's been great, and he came up big in a clutch spot. I think that's what separates the real quality guys. Now, can you do it again and keep stacking that? Then makes you an elite level guy. He's got an elite level leg. There is no doubt about that. When he hits it, it goes.
What was the problem on Sunday with Cam Taylor-Britt?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know, and I want to wonder if he was hurt. I want to wonder if. He gave Deontay Johnson a lot of free releases where he tried to jam him.
A lot of cushion. Almost 5 to 10 yards, 5 to 7 yards every time.
But even when he pressed, he never really got his hands on Deontay. Deontay just got kind of a little move and off the sidelines. And so I don't know. I mean, listen, PFF is not the be all end all, and I certainly don't quote it very often because it's simply not. But, I thought he played great the first 2 games, and so did they. They had him rated the number 1 corner in the league through the first 2 games. And one of those included him getting beat by Rashee Rice on a long ball in Kansas City, which happens. And then he obviously made up for that crazy one-handed interception. I mean, is it a guy that needs to talk to motivate himself? I mean, he hadn't talked before these, the 2 crazy weeks where he spouted off. Is something physically amiss? Then he also though turns around, Mike, and makes that crazy interception today that got overruled by his own holding penalty, but it was just a ridiculous athletic play to make.
It was an incredible athletic play in person when we see it.
But he wiped it out with his own penalty, so that didn't know. I mean, DJ Turner took snaps off of him, and good for DJ to stay. Listen, man, this kid lost a starting job, and he's probably looking, going, what did I not do to lose my job? It might not be anything you did. They want Dax Hill to play corner, and he played well at corner in camp, and that's how the ball bounces. But for him to be ready to play those meaningful snaps today, and honestly, I think played pretty well, says a lot about him too.
And let's look at the domino effect of this, Skinny. With Dax Hill and DJ Turner, are we going to see perhaps a rotation for the foreseeable future?
I don't know about a pure rotation, like you get 2 series, I get 2 series, whatever.
Situational.
Or you start a guy, and if he struggles, you go, hey man, you got it today. I'll put the other guy in, and almost kind of like Scooby sounds a relief pitcher in baseball. I'll start you today, and you don't have it, I'll bring in Fred, and then next time around, Fred gets the start, and he doesn't have it, I'll bring you in. And so I think that's maybe part of it. I do think this. We've seen this happen before, right? Especially at that cornerback position where for whatever reason a player gets in a slump. Nobody can explain it. And then suddenly they're back out of the slump because they're talented. And I think for whatever reason, it's just a 2-game slump at the moment. But Cam Taylor-Britt's in a slump. Maybe it's technique. Maybe it's health. Maybe Deontay Johnson was just that good today. But it's something. There's no doubt about that. And to your question, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
All right, and wrapping it up here, Skinny, a couple of injuries we're going to be following. Certainly, we'll start with Trey Hendrickson, and he got dinged up, as we said, I think earlier, with about 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and he was down on the ground for a good 4 to 5 minutes. And the thing that was unusual to me, Skinny, is to see
players kneeling.
What?
The players kneeling.
Players kneeling. Dave Canales, the other head coach, Carolina's head coach, came over and stood behind Zach, or stood with Zach, and I could only assume or presume that he was either unable to move or some type of stinger, or he was knocked out.
Yeah, I think it's one of two. You're right.
And that was concerning at that time to see the 2 head coaches and then Lou come onto the field to check on Trey. And, you don't want to speculate as to what the injury is, except go with what was announced by the team, and that is a neck injury. He was able to talk with one of the trainers that helped him walk to the locker room with about 3 minutes to go in the game, 2 minutes to go in the game. He was able to walk off the field under his own power, but they had already taken his helmet, taken his shoulder pads and jersey off. So that's certainly a situation we'll have to monitor. And Mike Hilton, I think Bengals really dodged a bullet there with him in the end zone in the first quarter, because when he went down and they were doing what appeared to be the ACL check on his left knee, what was going through your mind at that point?
Yeah, and then he goes in the tent for a period of time, and you're like, okay, you're in the tent. That's not good. You're in the tent for a bit. That's even worse. And then he pops out of the tent and pops back on the field. I mean, is he that much of a tough guy, or did the ACL test come back of, hey, man, it may have scared you, but you're fine, and you're okay to go play? And to the Trey injury, yeah, I mean, a stinger can sometimes literally leave a guy momentarily paralyzed on the field. And I think that's the scary part when you get the stinger or knocked out. Obviously, the guy's knocked out. That can be just as bad. It was something very serious. Players and coaches don't react that way. When guys take a knee and the 2 head coaches are talking and a guy's still laying on the field, it was serious, whatever it is. But to your point, yeah, I mean, all we know of the report is it's neck, and that could be a billion different things, including a stinger.
Well, a lot of people in that locker room obviously want Trey back for next week. And a lot of people in that locker room, Bengals victorious as it were, know what's up next Sunday at Paycor Stadium. The Baltimore Ravens, they're playing on Sunday Night Football. So it will be a monumental game. Could be, depending on what happens, an elimination game of sorts. If you go into that game and if it's the Bengals, you're able to pull that game out and you're 2-3. you're suddenly back on track.
Very much.
Kind of feeling, okay, now we'll have our first division victory. And if somehow they get through next week and beat the Ravens and they're 1-0 in the division, I don't want to say that the 2-3 is insignificant, but it doesn't hurt nearly as much if you're 1-0 in the division.
Yeah, and plus at that point, Baltimore would be at a minimum 2-3. Possibly if they were to lose the Buffalo game, as we're recording this, it's getting ready to kick off. They could be 1-4 after that game. Cleveland's a mess still. They're 1-3. Pittsburgh finally lost today. We're gritty and losing, but if Pittsburgh loses next week, it's to go to 3-2 and you're 2-3. You're feeling great because you still got 2 shots at Pittsburgh, and the season's still very much in front of you. And maybe we all just need to shut up when Zach says it's a long season. It's a week-to-week league, and you know what? It is.
It is. And when you have Joe Burrow and you have the offense playing at a much higher level than it did last year when they were 1-3, that's the other thing. If you want to sit and look at this 4 games through rose-colored glasses, that's the way to do it. Your best players on offense are starting to look like your best players on the team. You've got the division in front of you, and you have opportunities in what I think is a watered-down AFC, and insofar as I don't think anybody's going to run away with the AFC. I really don't.
Yeah, Kansas City might by winning 3 and 4 point games. God love them for it. They keep figuring out a way to do it. But I think you're right. Even if they do that, I think they've shown so far this year that at least they're beatable. They haven't lost, and kudos to them. But they don't look as invincible as we've seen them look in the past.
Yeah, and I probably should have mentioned Kansas City, but I almost look at Kansas City as another team altogether. Something altogether different. I think the Bengals at this point should be focused on trying to get the division won, and something they weren't able to do last year. They get to start anew next week at home against Baltimore, and that would be a great step if they were able to get that win.
Indeed.
All right. He is Richard Skinner, does a great job covering the Cincinnati Bengals and the NFL for local12.com. Be sure to follow him on the X, Local12 Skinny. Skinny, do you have anything planned for posting?
Yeah. We've got, we'll have this podcast up. Obviously, I had a Zoom interview with our sports anchor, Yanni Trangilis. He asked me about 4 or 5 questions after the game. I got our game story up with the video highlights, and I'll have a column about this offense and how much it's going to have to shoulder the load. And I think it's capable of doing that the rest of the year.
All right. He is Richard Skinner. My name is Mike Petraglia. Follow me on the X at Trags, Trags. Of course, you can follow the Jungle Roar Pod YouTube page at youtube.com/@Jungle Roar Pod. And of course, our content at CLNScincy.com. For Richard Skinner, I'm Mike Petraglia, Trags. Thanks for watching this episode of the Jungle Roar Skinny Bengals postgame pod.